Get out your pen and paper. It is signing season. And today we've got not one, not two, not three, but 4 contracts to talk about. It's been a busy week for the Montreal Canadiens and the Laval Rocket because sure enough, now that June has arrived, we're getting closer to the draft, we're getting closer to free agency, and GMs are starting to really focus on roster moves. Both the Canadiens and the Rocket have been busy within the last week or so, and the pens have been flowing with ink. We've got 4 new contracts between the organizations to talk to you about today, and some thoughts on those signings. And make sure you stick around to the end of the video because I'm going to point you in the direction of some really incredible exclusive information about the Montreal Canadiens and that 5th round pick that's coming up in a few weeks at the NHL Draft. Let's get the big contract out of the way first. We finally have an answer as to whether or not Laval is going to retain the bulk of its coaching staff. And the answer is yes. This actually came as a bit of a surprise to me. I thought all indications were pointing to perhaps they were going to move in a different direction, but no, I was wrong on this one. Jean-Francois and the rest of his staff, minus Kelly Buchberger, obviously, who has gone back to Alberta, have all been renewed on a multi-year contract extension. JF in his press availability confirming that it's a 3-year contract extension. So all of the rest of the coaches are back in Laval for another 3 years. Of course, we'll have to see who JF Uhl chooses as Kelly Buchberger's replacement. Although Uhl mentioned that he wasn't in a huge rush to do so, which I actually find as an interesting statement because you'd want to pick the best available assistant coach while there is still a broader pool. If you wait too long into the summer, a lot of the guys that you might want to target for that job are going to be snatched up by other teams. So let's hope they get to work on that sooner rather than later. But Uhl will be back. When the Canadiens announced this, there was definitely a vast variety of replies on social media to this. And people were either full-fledged in JF Uhl's corner saying, yeah, we love the coach, glad he's back. But there was a large contingent as well of people who were obviously very disappointed with the choice, saying, great, the prospects aren't going to get any ice time. Great. Well, we know how that's going to go. It's a bit of a mixed bag for me, I would say. I believe that this is the Canadiens organization has basically shown their hand here as to how they are going to approach development and their AHL team moving forward. We know that they have focused more on development this past season in terms of the Canadiens organization as a whole, and they've really rounded out the Canadiens development staff, Adam Nicholas and all, Frankie Bouillon, Paul Byron, all of those kinds of guys who have been brought in to start working on player development. And we know that that staff does come to Laval quite frequently throughout the year to do some practice sessions with the Laval team as well. And it seems that the Canadiens want to keep that going while keeping a coaching staff in place who will focus maybe less on necessarily development themselves, but more on just putting a popular and positive product on the ice to keep the Laval building full. We know that Laval is probably within the league's top 5 teams in terms of ticket sales and keeping the building close to capacity each and every game night. So that is an important part of the business side of the AHL. And so JF Uhl and his crew seem to do a good job of catering to the fans. Uhl speaks constantly about keeping the fans happy in the building. That's obviously a priority for them. And so it seems that the Canadiens are saying, okay, let's just keep that going. And we've got this robust development staff employed that will work more on the development of the prospects. Whether that's going to work for a long-term solution, we'll have to wait to see. Personally, I would prefer to see, yes, the development staff that the Canadiens have, but also a coaching staff who are truly committed to developing the prospects and finding ways to put a good winning product on the ice with that priority in mind. So we'll see how that balance continues to go. We know that there have been times where veterans with more experience are placed into important situations or challenging situations because the team is looking more for the win in that case, in a third period tight game, or something with big stakes like that, where I'd like to see a little bit more of prospects in those situations so that they can learn, and yes, mistakes will be made. No, they might not win every game, but you would see constant development moving forward. I can't quite judge that yet. I can judge off of what we've seen in the past. I'm not sure that this past season was a great indicator. Really rough first 3 months of the season because of some personnel choices in the lineup, I believe, in terms of free agency signings last summer. They did seem to get things together for a few months right after Christmas, but then they really struggled down the stretch in the last couple of weeks of the season, and of course did not qualify for the playoffs this year, although they were very close. It came down to the last 2 games before that was decided. So I will say congratulations to JF Uhl and his staff. I'm pleased to see that they have their job security, and that question has been answered. I wish them the best of luck. I'd like to see them make another step forward from this past season. I think some of the young prospects that were there this season showed some good growth and can build on that this coming season. But there's going to be a whole new crop of rookies coming in with some pretty big potential, and they are going to need ice time. They are going to need development to get them ready to make that jump to the NHL. So I think this next season is even more crucial than last season was. That brings us to the second contract that's been signed just recently. This one I am very pleased about. This is a 2-year entry-level contract for forward Jared Davidson, who Davidson is one of those guys who I just kind of alluded to that I don't think was necessarily deployed in the best way possible in the beginning of the season. He was a healthy scratch on some nights. Jared Davidson only played about 38 games total last year for the Laval Rocket. Now, granted, he was out with an injury for a significant amount of time, but in the first half of the season, he found himself watching from the press box on quite a few nights. And it wasn't until he was put into the lineup and bumped up the lineup due to injuries and recalls that he really kind of blossomed and took full control of the role and responsibility he was given and showed that he could handle it. He's 21. He ranked 3rd in goals among rookies on the team, just behind Logan Mailloux and Joshua Waugh. That's a pretty significant thing for a kid that only played 38 games in total for the season. So I am hoping that Jared Davidson is going to get a bigger, expanded role. I hope he stays on the top 6 for this coming season because I think that he's got great potential. Very glad to see that the Canadiens signed him finally to his entry-level contract. Then we get to the first of our last 2 contract signings, which for me caused me to scratch my head a little bit, because I'm not sure about these second 2 signings that we're going to talk about. The first is a goaltender, Connor Hughes. All indications would be that they're not planning to bring Kazimir Kaskisuo back, despite the fact that he was the one who kind of stepped in and stabilized things in the second half of the season so that Jakub Dobeš could really focus on learning what he needed to learn. And this was, again, another instance where I saw a lot of fan pushback on social media because Kazimir Kaskisuo was liked by the fans. He's a popular social media personality on YouTube. And so I think fans were really expecting and hoping that Kaskisuo would be back in tandem with Jakub Dobeš. Instead, the Canadiens have signed Connor Hughes to a 1-year, 2-way NHL contract. Now, you might be saying, who's Connor Hughes? Well, he is from Ontario. He's from London. But the reason that you probably aren't familiar with him is because, number one, he went undrafted. He's 27 and was never drafted into the NHL. And he's played his last 6 years in Switzerland, playing in Lausanne in the Swiss National League. That's a little bit why this is a head scratcher for me. This signing gives me the same tugging in my gut with my instincts that Strauss-Mann's signing did last year. I was very vocal last year that when they signed Strauss-Mann, I didn't think that was the right guy to put in place with Jakub Dobeš, because Strauss-Mann didn't have the AHL experience to be A, a mentor for Jakub Dobeš, and B, an equal partner in being able to share the burden and the load in the AHL, because Strauss-Mann had spent the entire previous season basically in the ECHL. This rings very similar to me. Connor Hughes is 27, so sure, he's got the age and he's been playing in the Swiss League, which is more competitive than the ECHL is, been playing amongst men and so forth. But it means he hasn't played pro hockey in North America. Sure, he grew up playing hockey in North America on the smaller ice, but as a professional goaltender, he's going to need transition time to understand and adapt to playing professional hockey in a very physical, competitive, quick league on North American ice. And again, I don't know that this is the right kind of goaltender to put next to Jakub Dobeš. Now, granted, Dobeš is in a much different place in his sophomore season. After struggling for those first 3 months last season, because he wasn't getting a whole heck of a lot of support from Strauss-Mann, Kazimir Kaskisuo came in, took some of that burden off of Dobeš, and Dobeš then very much focused on what he needed to learn. And we saw that by the end of the season, he was being tapped regularly as the go-to guy because he was really starting to flourish. And we expect and hope that that's going to continue to grow this coming season. So he's in a bit of a different place in his developmental process, but you still need a strong partner for him as a tandem. I'm not knocking Connor Hughes, and I'm certainly not saying that he couldn't be that guy. I just don't know yet because he's only played in the Swiss League. So this is one where I'm hoping I'm wrong. I'm hoping Connor Hughes comes in and ends up being a stable and solid piece of the goaltending puzzle in Laval. But I'm just not sure yet, and I'm not sure why he needed an NHL two-way contract. This could have been a Laval AHL contract, in my opinion. Speaking of Laval AHL contracts, last summer I was vocal yet again on the number of signings in the offseason that seemed to be geared more towards finding local guys and fitting them into the puzzle than it was about going out and finding the really quality veterans around the AHL that are really going to provide a solid foundation and support system for your prospects, which is what I would prefer to see at the AHL level. I've got nothing against signing the local guys if they've got those qualities. I'm not sure yet about Israel Mianskum. He's 21. He is a Quebecer, and he got a 2-year AHL contract. The first year, it's a two-way deal, which I'm hoping means he's probably going to spend most of the season in Trois-Rivières. But the second season is a one-way deal, which means they are indicating that he could likely be playing in Laval for that second season. Now, this kid has spent the past 5 years playing for Sherbrooke in the Q. And yes, last season he had some great numbers. He had 87 points last season, 35 goals, and 52 assists. So that's nothing to sneeze at. That's a pretty impressive season. But keep in mind, that was his 5th year playing in the Q, playing against 17-year-olds. So we'll see if he can transition that to now playing pro hockey in the American Hockey League. Again, I will reserve judgment on that until we actually see what he's capable of in training camp and maybe some preseason games for Laval. If this is a case where they simply want to have a guy who was able to put up a lot of points in the Q and stash him in Trois-Rivières, let him help the Lions out in the ECHL, and he's a good call-up piece for when the Rockets lineup gets depleted, I'm perfectly okay with that. I think that'll be a good strategy, and it sounds like he could be a good candidate for that, particularly if he's got that much offense that he's able to continue in the AHL as well. I'd love to hear your perspective. The fans, what do you think of all these signings? Are you happy JF Uhl has been renewed along with the rest of his coaches? Are you pleased to see Jared Davidson sign a 2-year ELC? And what are your thoughts on goaltender Connor Hughes and also Israel Mianskum? Would love to hear your comments down below. And I promised you at the beginning of this video that if you stuck around till the end, I was going to point you in the direction of some really incredible information about the Habs and the draft coming up later this month and what they might do with that 5th overall pick. And heck, the 26th overall pick as well. Remember, they've got 2 first-round picks. Well, over on the Canadiens Connection podcast here on the channel, we have started a series, as we do every summer, of exclusive interviews with draft and prospect experts, giving us their insight and their thoughts on the draft class and what the Canadiens could do or should do in their targeting for 5th overall and 26th overall. We've already talked with Russ Cohen from Elite Prospects, and we've talked to Jerome Berube, the director of scouting for Hockey Prospect, which puts out the NHL Black Book every year. And if you missed either of those, then you're going to want to head over to the Canadiens Connection tab, the podcast tab here on the channel. Check those out. But I've got the most recent one right here for you. Click that, watch it, and at the end of that video, you'll get another link to watch the one with Russ Cohen as well. And we'll see you next time.